Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review and rant on the 2013 remake Evil Dead. Now, this is a film that I saw when it came out in the theater. I was not a fan of it. I was even less of a fan of the theatrical experience because it sucked. I kept seeing the shadow of the projector in the bottom corner of the screen for the entirety of the movie, which is fucking distracting and really takes you out of it. But that aside, I wasn't a fan of the movie. I did not care for it. And despite that, I picked this up on Blu-ray for cheap because it's been a while. It's been quite a long time, so I wanted to see if my opinion on it had changed in any way. And after watching it again, it has. I don't hate this movie anymore. I'm just disappointed by this film. I feel the same way that a disappointed parent feels when they catch their kid and catch them on a lie or catch them doing something bad, and you have that sit down and you're just really disappointed in them because they had so much potential and they wasted it in that moment. That's how I feel about this movie. It has so much potential, but it's wasted because it takes and makes decisions that are unbelievably frustrating and idiotic. And I will get to why those decisions are so bad soon enough. So the film is directed by Fede Álvarez, and I think his direction is fine. It's not Sam Raimi. And to be honest, I think that's a good thing. I'm glad that Fede, other than a few shots of like the roaming camera, he wasn't trying to ape or trying to emulate or trying to copy Sam Raimi. No one is going to copy Prime Sam Raimi. No one's going to come close to that kind of controlled chaos. So I'm fine with Fede not going there. I thought his direction was fine. I thought it was solid. He did a good job with the atmosphere and the mood of the film. Shooting the various different sequences in the movie that dealt with practical effects. And the finale I thought was particularly really well done. So I don't really have a problem with the direction. I think it's one of the better things about the movie. I know other people have said it lacks energy, and I respectfully disagree. It just isn't the same amount of energy as Sam Raimi. But then again, like, who really has that same amount of energy as a director anyway? The screenplay by Fede and Rodo Saúguez. Saúguez, say it again. That is where this film falls flat on its fucking face. That is where this film disappoints the most, is with the screenplay, which is sadly what is the problem with so many movies nowadays in the horror genre, whether it's a remake of an iconic classic film like The Evil Dead, or it's just a new or a somewhat original horror film. It just all comes down to the screenplay and characters. Two most prominent and important things in any movie, if you ask me, are a strong, if not great, screenplay and equally as strong characters. And this film does not have a particularly strong or great script, and it does not have strong or great characters. It has one character that's pretty strong in Mia, but everybody else is the epitome of cannon fodder. And one character in particular is literally one of, if not the dumbest character in horror film history. I'm not exaggerating things. Like, this guy is literally one of the dumbest motherfuckers I have ever seen in a horror film. And might not even be just in a horror movie. Like, one of the dumbest fucking idiots I've seen in a movie, period. So, yeah, the script, the concept isn't bad. That's what's so frustrating and aggravating about this movie is they find a genuinely interesting way to get a group of people back into a cabin in the woods in the middle of nowhere and having to deal with possession and the Deadites. They do in the Book of the Dead. They find a genuinely interesting and somewhat unique way to go down that path again, with it being centered around a moment of rehab for this character Mia, who's addicted to drugs. And so this cabin, this isolated cabin, is supposed to be her moment of redemption where she can finally get clean. And I like that. I think that's legitimately good. It's a good setup. They waste it though with some really piss poor supporting characters who you don't give two fucks about throughout the entirety of the movie. And like I said, the dumbest motherfucker in horror film history. At least to me, he's easily the dumbest fucking guy I've seen in a horror film. Because there are dumb characters in horror movies, but this guy takes the cake because of how he ignores so many fucking obvious warnings. And I'll get to him. Trust me, I will. But yeah, good concept, good setup. And I like the finale with the raining blood, and there are some things about it that I don't like, which I'll talk about soon enough, but I still like it. I like the moment when Mia is brought back to life. I think that's a nice play and a nice take on the series of sequences that were shown in Evil Dead films previously, where Ash would bury his girlfriend alive while she's possessed. But in this, there's actually a positive outcome. The loved one is actually able to be saved. Yes, the way that it's handled is a little bit off because I don't know why she's just right as rain and perfectly healthy and fine. It doesn't even have a fucked up tongue after everything, but hey, it is what it is, and there are much bigger problems with this movie than that. So it shows creativity and ingenuity there, and that's another thing that this film is lacking. It's lacking the same amount of creativity and ingenuity that was present in the other Evil Dead films in the franchise that Sam Raimi was able to bring to the series that made it so unique and so genuinely captivating and interesting. It has moments of creativity, like the climax, and like the bit that I was talking about when she gets buried and brought back to life by her brother, but there aren't that many moments like that. So you're just left with a lot of bits and a lot of things about this movie that are deja vu or been there, done that, or less effective takes on things that you saw done way better in the other films in the franchise. For instance, when Mia is initially possessed, she gets attacked by the trees in the woods. I felt that the way that it was handled in the original Evil Dead, which was much more scary, despite the fact that this is more intense. They turned the intensity up to 11 with, mood and atmosphere and even show a tendril go up her snatch. But that doesn't mean that it's more effective in terms of the horror. I think the original Evil Dead was more effective with the tree rape scene because it didn't show as much. It left it to your imagination, and it left you to come up with what kind of horror the character was going to endure ultimately. It didn't show everything. By showing everything, you don't really provide as much in terms of genuine horror for me. And this screenplay has a serious problem with giving away too much. It telegraphs the final form of not only one character, but multiple characters when they're possessed. And that really dampens the impact of these sequences with these possessed characters. One of the more effective scares throughout the entire franchise is when you'd see someone who looked normal and then they turn around and they'd look all messed up, and you really weren't prepared for how they would appear when they're possessed. In this, there are two characters. Mia, you see the possessed version of herself twice before she even gets possessed finally. So that particular makeup and that particular possessed form is completely dull to me, because it's deadened in terms of its effectiveness and its impact way before she even gets fully possessed. And then you have the character of I'm trying to think, is it Olivia? Is that who it is? No. I think it's Natalie. No, it's not Natalie. Okay, it's Olivia. It's Olivia. Olivia is the character played by Jessica Lucas. So she's the one that ultimately would go on to cut her face off in what is supposed to be a really intense and gruesome and really horrific moment. But you see her with her face cut off in the mirror before she cuts her face off. So when you see that possessed form of her in the mirror, in which is just a lazy jump scare if you think about it, it completely destroys the overall impact of the scene later when she cuts her face off, because then it becomes predictable. Then you're like, okay, she's going to cut her face off now. It's a good effect, but its effectiveness is hurt immensely because of the decision to give away way too much. I don't know why the screenwriters decided to do that. Big mistake on their part. And then what makes that even more frustrating is then when they don't give it away, like for instance when the character of Natalie, when she is the one that shows her form, like they don't actually show that ahead of time. So when she turns around and she's all possessed and got nails in her face, that's actually a pretty striking image. Or when her arm is getting possessed and she cuts it off, that's effective. Or when the dumbest motherfucker in horror film history, Eric, when he winds up possessed, that's a little more effective too, because you don't see his final form beforehand. But I gotta be honest, his final form isn't really that memorable, so they really dropped the ball on that. But yeah, it's one of those films where the screenplay is just a mess in numerous different ways, and one of them is definitely telegraphing way too many of the film's more intense and supposedly genuinely scary moments. Another thing is just how woefully inept the screenplay is when it comes to writing characters and making them compelling or interesting or likable in any shape or form other than Mia. I actually did not mind this character the second time around. I actually liked her. I thought Jane Levy actually did a good job, minus the moments when she's admittedly trying to do her best William Shatner impression, when she's whispering, when she's possessed and she's talking to her brother and trying to tell them to get out of there. That was not very good. They really should have done a different take there. But other than her, I mean, Shiloh Fernandez as David Allen, the guy was just boring. As boring can be. Your average, generic, everyday Abercrombie and Fitch model turned actor, or a guy from the CW. No presence, nothing about him that was remotely interesting or fun. Just a bland, pile of nothing. Then you have Taylor Pucci as Eric. The performance was very flat and very lifeless, but it's not his performance that bugs me the most. What pisses me off about this performance is the character. It's the character that he plays. This fucking guy, Eric, Hipster Jesus, is really who he is. Fucking Hipster Jesus is an unbelievable moron. And this also exposes one of the film's biggest problems with the screenplay, because everything that follows, and everything that you see in the film that deals with the Deadites, that deals with possession, that deals with the actual horror in the movie, is all set up in the most moronic way possible. So unlike the first two films where it's just curiosity, hey, we're bored, we're in a cabin, there's a tape recorder, let's play it, what else do we have to do? It makes sense. Or even something that, even the moment in Army of Darkness, even that was more tolerable than this. This fucking guy and this fucking screenplay decides, in a script that is not even intended to be a satire by the way of horror tropes or the horror genre, it plays it straight for the most part for 99% of the movie. So it decides, for a reason that I still don't understand, let's have this character Eric knowingly realize that this book was in the basement and is wrapped up in a black trash bag and covered in barbed wire, and might as well have a sign on it that says, "Don't open this book, you dumbass." And he ignores all the warnings, all the warning signs that most of us would see a mile away. I mean, probably even a blind man could figure this one out. Oh, he's just feeling the book, feels the barbed wire. Nope, I'm not touching that. Not this guy. Not the dumbest motherfucker in horror film history. So he not only cuts the barbed wire, opens the bag, looks at the book, and not only does he flip through the book, but he reads the book, despite there being numerous warnings in the book that are written and are very clear, and the audience can see that say, "Don't read this, don't do this, don't be a fucking dumbass, Eric." Nope. Reads it, ignores all these warnings, and if that isn't bad enough, he deciphers hidden fucking incantations that are crossed out by somebody who had the book previously and saw what the book did when somebody read these incantations and is trying to protect people from unleashing this evil. And Eric, the Hipster Jesus, the dumbest motherfucker in horror film history, I'm gonna decipher it and read the incantation. And then the Evil Dead is awoken and people get possessed and things go to hell, and I'm wondering, what the hell? What the hell were these writers thinking? What the hell were these writers smoking when they decided to write this particular setup for how the Deadites get involved in this remake? It completely kills your credibility. It completely destroys, a lot of ways, the genuine horror that you're trying to build, because in the back of your head, you just are thinking about how dumb this motherfucker was. And if he wasn't so stupid and the script wasn't so mind-numbingly dumb, then none of this stuff would ever be happening. And they try to justify it by having this guy suffer and get the most punishment throughout the movie. But it doesn't work, because you're stuck with this character for way too long of the running time. He's not likable, he's not funny, he's not charismatic, he's the guy who caused all this fucking shit to happen in the first place because he's a fucking idiot, and he's still alive for majority of the movie, and the screenplay even tries to make him a hero. You have some hero moments with this guy. And I'm like, no, I ain't fucking buying this. I ain't fucking, no. And then the strongest character in the film, and Mia, once she gets possessed, she is trapped in the basement, locked up for half the movie. So you're left with this fucking idiot. You're left with a pile of nothing in the Abercrombie and Fitch fucking guy, and Shiloh Fernandez as David. Olivia and Natalie, nothing to these characters. They don't have any chemistry with any of the cast. They don't really provide any kind of on-screen presence. So when they get possessed and they die, who gives a fuck? The film suffers immensely when it comes to the pacing and becomes really dull and boring because now the strongest character in Mia locked up, chained up, out of the movie. So now we're stuck with these really bland, boring characters. And you don't care what happens to any of them. Whether they get possessed, whether they get ass fucked by a Kandarian dagger, you don't give a fuck about what happens to them. So this all leads up to the climax where Mia is thankfully back in the movie. She's been unpossessed, but now she's got to deal with the abomination, which this is another moment where the script drops the ball. The abomination looks way too similar to the possessed form of Mia, to the point where you're kind of like, didn't we already see that? And not only that, it also reminds a lot of viewers and myself and others of The Ring, of Samara. So that doesn't help at all when you have the same fucking design as The Ring, and that's also way too similar to the version of Mia that you've seen numerous times already throughout the movie. So yeah, you get the raining blood, and you get some really tense moments where the abomination is stalking Mia, and she's cornered, and her knee gets sliced, and she finds a way out. Her arm gets trapped underneath a SUV, and she rips her arm out from underneath it, and grabs the chainsaw and just skull fucks the abomination in an epic moment. It really is epic. But the rest of the film is not on the same level of epicness. The rest of the film is not on the same level of quality. So it's still so bittersweet and so disappointing and so frustrating because you're like, why wasn't the rest of the movie like this? Why wasn't the rest of the movie this badass? This consistently good? Why weren't the other characters as strong as Mia? Why was this film not better when it comes to its writing? And I don't know. And some of the stuff is really easy to fix. For example, with the character of Eric, just establish that he is obsessed with the occult. Establish that he cannot get enough of it. So then when he encounters this mysterious book that's covered in a trash bag and barbed wire and sees that it's a book of the dead, the guy is going to be drawn to it. He's going to read it. He's going to go through the trouble of deciphering it because he's obsessed and he can't help himself. That works. Instead of him just randomly losing like 100 fucking brain cells and deciding to be stupid for no reason. Like, he's even established as like one of the smarter guys in the group, and then he's like the biggest fucking idiot in the planet. Or it just baffles me. I don't have the words to describe like how dumb the decision was by the screenwriters to handle that character and that scene that way. And they also handle the whole possessed demons wrong too, because they're never scary, they're never intimidating, because there's a lot of intensity here with these characters when they're possessed, but there's no subtlety, and there's a lot of unoriginality with how they're approached, because when they open their mouth, they sound more like copies of The Exorcist, when Reagan is possessed, or like their lines were ghost written by Rob Zombie, with all the swearing and shit. It's not really that effective. It's not scary. And this film is a prime example of more intensity. Pumping up your film with intensity to 11 does not necessarily mean that it's scarier. I mean, the first Evil Dead was still really intense, and so was the second film. But they weren't intense to the point where they were overly intense. And this film goes overboard on intensity. And as a result, every time it does that, it loses its impact, and it's less and less intense. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, it's terrifying, it's relentless, it will absolutely blow you away, it's the scariest movie ever, and it's not. Because it's trying too hard to be intense and to be scary. And because of the fact that it lacks subtlety, it lacks genuine scares most of the time. And tension. But the lack of tension is also more due to the fact that it has such shitty characters other than Mia. So yeah, I know most of this review has just been talking about the screenplay, but that's the biggest problem with the movie. So that's the thing that's going to take the most focus. And also, what the fuck was up with that Bruce Campbell cameo after the end credits? It was pointless. It looked weird. It looked like the camera was smeared in shit. Bruce Campbell just shows up in a shot where it's just way too up close, uncomfortably up close to his face, and he says, groovy. And the movie ends, and you're like, what was the point of that? It was just pointless fan service. I love Bruce Campbell, but that's also kind of frustrating on another level, because it's like, why wasn't Bruce Campbell in this? Why didn't we just have Evil Dead 4? So then you're just bringing up those kind of feelings and that kind of frustration, and that does the film no favors either. The performances, like I said, Jane Levy, I thought she did a really good job. Everybody else really left no impression whatsoever. Piles of absolute nothing to me. The music by Roque Banos, at times it works in terms of creating a creepy or eerie mood and atmosphere. Other times it's a little too much. Like, there are sequences that are literally just sirens going off. Not police sirens, but like air raid sirens, and I know why, but that really got on my nerves after a little bit. I don't think it really helped the film as much as I think the filmmakers intended it to. Features some really nice cinematography by Aaron Morton. I mean, the film looks really good from that perspective. The editing is fine by Brian Shaw. I don't think it's really that problematic. Despite its 92-minute running time, it drags. It really does, because of the fact these characters suck so much other than Mia, and there's no tension, and the horror isn't really that scary, and really what you're left with is just an excuse to see some gore. And the practical effects are really good. I will give the effects artists who worked on this film the utmost praise. They deserve it. I love the fact that almost everything in this film that was dealing with, the supernatural horror was done practically. There was barely any CGI except for some wonky CGI fire in a few scenes. But other than that, that was the only bit of CGI in the movie. I respect the decision from the filmmakers and the producers to do everything as practically as much as humanly possible. Just needed a better screenplay with better characters to make the effects feel like they're not wasted in a very disappointing movie. I know my friend has used this line before when it comes to describing this movie, and I use it as well when I initially talked about this film, and I still feel this way about this movie. Evil Dead Remake is a dead fuck. There are moments where it will satisfy you, it will give you pleasure, but nowhere near enough, and it just lies there and is just disappointing. That's real. I mean, it is. There are moments where you're like, oh fuck yeah, with the gore, or the finale with the raining blood and the chainsaw to the face, or a really epic moment where Mia just cuts the Abomination's face in half. And you have these other technical merits that it definitely does deserve, but it just does not satisfy in the end as much as it should, and fully. And that's because it's a dead fuck, and the computer don't lie. Thanks for watching my review of the Evil Dead remake, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.